It's recording. Now it's recording.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I think I wouldn't say there's no such thing as justice. I think there is justice.
Yeah, yeah. That's the
So,
thing.
like Nietzsche, I mean, I don't think Nietzsche would go that far and say that the possibility of justice is impossible.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Like, because I think it's his definition of justice, which is saying like, if we take the definition of justice being like, you can't judge the entire whole
Hmm.
because you're within the whole, because
Hmm.
you're being within being.
Hmm.
There's no way you can go outside of being. Then, like, in some sense, like injustice, like this is what he says though, like at least in Human Ought to Human, injustice is like always going to be a part of reality. But I think if we were to argue for justice, I think it would have to be in virtue of becoming.
Hmm.
Like that's the only thing I would say. Like, because I was thinking about this, which was like, okay, if we play with the paradigm that Nietzsche's talking about, which is saying like our values are grounded from something illogical, and then by virtue of it being illogical, we're always committing injustice because we can't see the whole, then wouldn't that, if we were aware of it, create an ironic awareness where actually we would commit more justice versus more injustice if we actually think we can actually see the entire whole? Because I think seeing the entire whole would be actually the arguments of like dogmatism and fundamentalism, right? This sort of like absoluteness.
Hmm.
But like,
Well,
because I was like, if we were aware of this, wouldn't we be ironically like kinder, more compassionate, more humble, understand, like, you know what I mean? Like it
mhm.
does kind of create like an ironic like awareness of just like, oh yeah, we are unjust beings, but like once I realize this, I could be more just. like it's weird. um
I- the other absolute though is the relation
mhm,
between the whole and the part, you
yeah,
being the part. And
mhm,
I think the reason why justice was even able to be a concept is because someone became aware of that relation.
yes,
So, so I think this is where like philosophy is very crucial, where everything becomes really simple, where you realize the relation, and that means you have an understanding of the sense of the whole, which would entail not knowing the whole, but you, in not knowing the whole, you actually know how you don't know the whole, which
mhm,
actually gives rise to the relation of the part in
mhm,
question.
mhm,
Where when people approach a situation, they can't really find what's appropriate because they don't have a sense of how they don't have the whole picture.
mhm,
And through having a lack of that sense, you're able to actually gain a moving picture. It's like not it's inherently not static, and it
mhm,
moves
mhm,
because the world in which you're inhabiting, in which you get a glimpse of the whole, is constantly changing.
mhm,
And that's like a very Heideggerian thing.
mhm.
um I it's I think I feel like justice is only found in the relation. Like I really I am a
Yeah,
believer of it. When you get to ontology and you don't talk about it in terms of relation,
mhm.
then you're missing something. Not saying you are, but I'm just saying,
Yeah. I know what you're saying. Yeah, well, like this is why I think Nietzsche, like, he broke open these paradigms from like Heidegger and Buber and Deleuze and all them, because like if you think about it, like this is why they talk about the ethics of just like the other. Deleuze is stressing difference. Like, why would he stress difference? You know,
hmm
because you're aware of that relation in some
right.
sense. And then like Levinas too, right? Like if it's actually other, it has to be like in some sense, like if it's actually incomplete, if you're actually working with incompleteness, then like the other, this is like funny, is almost absolute then. Like it has to be
Mhm.
like an absolute other then to you.
Mhm.
Because if it was complete, then it wouldn't be other to you.
Mhm.
And if it's not other to you, then it's injustice.
Right.
Um,
So
yeah.
exactly, and not to already throw in storytelling, but
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Go
but
ahead.
this is why storytelling is like, in a certain sense, equal primordial to philosophy, because when you see the relation,
Mm-hmm.
there's different things that can sprout out, different pathways of understanding that relation,
Mm-hmm.
because there is no one way of understanding that relation,
Mm-hmm.
but there is, kind of to talk about what we were saying before we started recording. um, there are modes of being meaning, uh, identifying and come out from that relation, that are transparent, and then there are other modes that are not transparent and are diluted, that can't
Mm-hmm.
really understand how it's based off of that ontological relation. So like a good story is
Yeah.
simply having a good sense of how it has that ontological relation. So that like a theme is literally structured based off of the concept of the ontological relation, where you have a command that has the subject and predicate of the command are two competing like clauses that take into account one possible perspective of the ontological relation.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's one possible perspective, immediately another possible perspective emerges
Mm-hmm.
in order to have a sense of that relation. So each mode of being that comes forth out of the ontological relation is dictated by the theme, and the more transparent that mode is, the more thematic that mode is.
Mm-hmm.
So like kind of to go with like our conversation that we were having over Instagram about like, are there more modes?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I have to think there has to be more than two,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
because though for you to have a mode, you probably are going to understand it via two perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different configurations of the ontological relation. There's so many ways that the two can
Mm-hmm.
take form and shape.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole point, I think, of science is just to have a strong understanding of how it of how it's dealing with that ontological relation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that,
Mm-hmm.
real quick, science in that case isn't just like necessarily empirical. It can also be non-empirical, potentially, in the sense that it's able to show the ontological relation in a transparent way
Mm-hmm.
that's different.
Yeah. But I will say that I think there's certain dangers because I think even those that do the science don't understand that there is an ontological relation. Um, like they just think, like for example, they just think like what is whatever they discover. Like, for example, if you were to bridge the science versus art, like for them, like it's just whatever we can judge and see. Like, yeah, are you seeing like what I'm getting at here? Like that there can still be like a failure. Like mainly I'm probably pointing to like scientism as
Mm-hmm.
such versus like science. Um, but I wanted to say this actually because this is what came up to my mind. You're saying like, well, I think there's more than two modes. And Nietzsche gave me this idea because I didn't know that he was doing this, and I think this is in I've just been reading like all over the place from Nietzsche, so I'm getting confused like which title of the works now. I want to say maybe it is Beyond Good and Evil, but it could be Ecce Homo. um, he says something like, actually, his concept of will to power was something that he hypothetically put to think through all the way to its limits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I was thinking, like, when you say, like, there has to be more than two modes, I was thinking, well, let's accept that there is more than two modes, but let's think these two modes to such an extreme level, to its limits,
Mm-hmm.
that it reveals other modes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I think, because, like, I think the temptation would be, okay, let's not keep talking about these two modes, because then we start believing there's just two modes. But I actually think this is the funny move, I think, where we should believe there's just two modes, so that way we can discover there is other modes. Like put it as the hypothetical, like there's only two modes. Let that be the set limit, and then think it through to its limit. And then once we do, we go, oh, because right now what you're saying is like there's other modes, but I can't think of them.
Right. Well, I see that as a possibility. I just don't know if that is what will happen. Just like if we think about like historically, for example, the people that started making science a viable mode
Mm-hmm.
were looking at the current mode and saying, like Galileo
Mm-hmm.
or Michelangelo, whoever, are saying the religious mode that's presented cannot be the only mode to explain God.
Yes, but how do we prove that that has not already been exhausted, for which they then determine there must be another mode?
I don't think you can prove that. I don't think you could prove
Yeah,
the limit until you're
I
past.
I know, but what I'm saying is like that's the thing that's like arbitrary. Like, how do we determining? And this is what's interesting. It's like, how are we determining the exhaustion
Mm-hmm.
of a concept? Because like this is interesting. Like I don't think there's actually an explanation for this. When someone like Galileo goes, oh, that doesn't. There seems to be something that doesn't make sense
Mm-hmm.
of. And like you probably could argue, actually, I would say, if we look historically, like, yeah, we could point to shifts and movements where like it was actually going to be inevitable that they were going to discover another mode, right? Because like I think this is whole Nietzsche's point too, is like the whole point of becoming is like a thing starts to exhaust itself, and and this is like Heidegger's whole thing, like it starts to conceal itself, and then in that concealing something is revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't know. Like it's to me, I think it's just like very arbitrary versus just like saying, okay, well, we could just explore the other modes versus like, well, how do we know when we decide to explore those other modes that we are already in a state of exhaustion of said mode?
Right. So like that's why for me, like for what you're saying to me supports what I believe to be the appropriate approach, which is since you don't know when the mode that you're in is exhausted,
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense to think through that mode, but to think about the whole, the relation to the whole. When you're thinking about basically the partial object in relation to the whole object,
Mm-hmm.
and you're just situated there versus having the relation between the partial object and the whole object just being implicitly in the focus of thinking through the partial object,
Yeah.
uh, then you don't even know what mode you're in. That's the thing. Like, you don't even know what you're doing. because the partial object, the part of the whole,
Mm-hmm.
hasn't been scaffolded out, because you're not focused on the part, you're focused on the possible part as it relates to the definitive relation of the whole.
Mm.
So
But then
like
yeah. Okay.
real quick, so it's like if you think, like when storytelling, when you think about the theme,
Mm-hmm.
other ways of telling the story emerge. That
Yes.
that's why, that's what's so, like, the first draft of the story I sent you has no fourth wall. There's so many aspects that are just totally not the same. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why these different aspects emerge is
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not thinking about the story that's on paper, but I'm thinking about the possible story that could be on the paper as it relates to the theme.
Okay. But my question is, how do we get to that transition point where, like, for example, like the fact that we're all aware of this partial object, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, okay, but then how did we become, like, how did we get there? Like, to me, that's the really arbitrary point of, like, how did we get to the point where we actually became self-aware that,
Yeah.
oh, it's a partial object?
So like there's the story, like when you're writing a script version of that answer versus like just, living your life. And they're
Yeah.
both basically the same, which is when you're a storyteller, the story goes under question. What the story is, the essence, the enduring aspect of the story gets thrown into question. Now, to translate that into real life, simple as, what is consciousness? what is what am I as a subject?
Mm-hmm.
What endures? What is the enduring feature that my subjectivity is operating under? It's thrown into question, which
Mm-hmm.
makes me realize lack, which
Mm-hmm.
makes me realize all these different Dasein, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
like there's all these different ways of expressing it because
Mm-hmm.
it's all part of this like ontological relation that is computationally irreducible.
Mm-hmm.
um so that it's as simple as that. The the guys, the guys the guys that get the most girls, for example, okay, don't throw the, they don't throw the question isn't thrown to them.
Like, they don't put themselves in question.
Correct. Otherwise, they if you because once you throw yourself in question, once you think about, oh, what am I? What is the enduring feature of myself? What is the self?
Yeah,
You're
but
thrown into an expositional state.
yeah, so but
But
that
if
would
you
have to be, yeah, but that would have to be contingent on what the subject perceives as failure. Like,
That can
so
be one of the things in
it
my mind.
can't, yeah, I
It doesn't
agree.
have to be, failure. It could be
Mhm.
something beautiful.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's true. But like that's the thing though. Like, this is what I've been thinking about, because it's like, because in some sense I feel like we're competing with, like, I would call, like, active and then, like, reactive forces. Okay. Which is like, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but like I feel like you're saying, like, if we're reactive, we could discover it anyways. But then, like, this is the
Sorry,
question.
can I cut you? Can I cut you off?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's not reactive. It can't be reactive.
Okay.
I think reactive is it has to be active. So what I mean is, so let me give you an example.
Yeah.
Let's say I say something about, let's say I find out more details about your personal life,
Okay.
and I make a judgment on your personal life
Mm-hmm.
that makes you go like, whoa, wait, maybe I'm doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You're not actually being thrown into question. You're not actually thinking there because you aren't the one that's deconstructing your own notion. I deconstructed it for you, and you just grasped onto my deconstruction. So you are
Uh-huh.
just operating under my thinking, under
Uh-huh.
my own matrix, and not your own matrix, which means you're not actually in your own expositional state. You're
Yeah.
in my perception of you and my judgment of you's expositional state. You're with under my matrix's expositional state and not your own.
Yes, that's true. But here's the thing. Once you introduce that problematic, the individual, if he's like, he could disagree with it, and like this is like the funny thing, and this is like this is like my dropped philosophy on timing, which was
I remember this.
you introduce the problematic to the individual, he denies it, but
Mhm.
then because it's now a part of his being, his consciousness, his awareness, he could be like, no, that's not true. But guess what? It's inevitable that he starts to question himself, because he goes, over time, he goes, well, this is weird, because not only did Luber say this to me, but suddenly my girlfriend said this to me.
Right.
Right? Like it starts accumulating, and then he goes, well, what if I am?
The difference there, the
Yeah,
difference
go ahead.
there is the discovery wasn't when I the okay, so
Yes, that's true.
it's a
That's true.
realization via your own encounter. So
Yes, that's true.
sure,
But you planted the seed.
I said something that might have put you on the path, but
Yes.
it's not your path yet. It's my path. It becomes
Uh-huh.
your path when you encounter something in your own time, like you said, in
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But it has to be in your own time.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But what I'm trying to say is like,
Sorry.
I don't think you're actually saying this, but like to me, it just sounds like the other's a little too barred. But like what I'm trying to say is like you did implant it, you laid it there, you grounded it there in his being, but like it takes him to unfold it. Right? Like, because the funny thing is, like, actually, your judgment could be wrong.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
And then because then it's like a twofold thing, because you're like, okay, over time, like we're both sitting, abiding with these judgments that we have about each other. And then like over time we go, oh, okay, like, am I actually this way? Am I this way? And then we start changing our judgments about each other. But like, it is interesting because if we didn't plant, this is the question, if we didn't plant that judgment or valuation on each other, would we have stumbled upon it? Like, I think this is a possible question, because um it requires a certain amount of knowing that we wouldn't have. But like,
Mhm.
I do think it's interesting in the sense of just like, yeah, in some ways we kind of permeate each other a little bit.
I completely agree. I would say
We still unfold it in our time. I agree with you on that.
it's still unfolded in our time, but there won't be our time if there's no other time.
Yeah. So maybe actually, maybe the encounter is a kind of permeation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I I used to tell my writing partner all the time that like I actually know you better than you know you. Because and vice versa, he knows me better than I know me.
Mhm.
And like the reason why I think this fits with what you're saying is
Mhm.
because I can't you can only know someone until their end, and you can only experience some other end and not your own end.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's from an experiential point of view.
Mhm.
Once you die, you're not experiencing death.
Mhm.
Someone else is experiencing your death. And then what happens is what
Mhm.
even in a relationship, let's say it's like we're friends for years and then what something happens and we're not friends anymore,
Mhm.
Like I'm experiencing the death of you, not the death of me to you.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
like judgment is always like under to me the question is does judgment get at understanding? Because understanding seems to not be contingent off of the other per se, and
Yeah.
judgment seems
Yeah.
to be contingent on the other. Understanding seems to be this malleable concept that transcends the finite because judgment is residing in the finite, and the finite needs the relation of the infinite or the other, and that
if it didn't have judgment, it wouldn't know it's a part of something,
right,
right? Like it needs to have a
right,
relation to something,
right.
and like yeah. So I mean yeah, okay. So I agree with the permeation point, and like I agree, like yeah, it would take our own unfolding to encounter this, and this is why like even when I was doing the philosophy of timing, I was like the construct that there is a right time is like actually like a little bit ridiculous because it's like well when you it's really what it's really saying is like when people say like oh no there's a right time to do it, what you're really just saying is like I value a specific outcome.
Right.
That's all you're really saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's a right time to do it, you value a specific outcome. When you say okay well maybe it's not a good time to tell my mom that I did this one thing because she looks like she's in a bad mood right now.
Right.
Like you want a specific outcome, but actually you don't know if that outcome is guaranteed. You're just thinking like, okay, she might have a better reaction, maybe, if she's not in a bad mood. And like that's it. It's a consideration and it's a value.
So when would be a good when would be a good time to bring it up?
Like what you value, right? Like you would rather have a conversation. This is exactly what you would value. You would rather have a conversation when someone's not angry already.
How do you know when they're? I mean,
What
okay.
I'm just saying
Besides the
like
obvious
arbitrary.
cases, besides
Yeah.
the obvious cases,
Yeah.
how do you know?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying like this predication is on a value that is so arbitrary of just like how do you actually know?
Right. You can't.
You can't know. You
Right.
can't know. You can't know. That's the whole thing that I was trying to say in the philosophy of timing was just like the only time, every time is the right time.
Right.
Because you just have to make a decision. It goes back to like Daniel Gardner's like absolute choice. Like you just that's it. Like, and if you think there is a right time, I would just say, well, you're just working off of arbitrary value, which is
Right.
like, I want this specific outcome and relation to manifest itself. So that way, maybe this outcome would be better. Like that's it. That's dating advice. Like it's filled with it. You know, relationship advice. It's all filled about a certain amount of timing, which really it's just competing values about what you want.
Yeah.
Like that's it. There's nothing about this timing that works or doesn't work.
Okay. So I don't want to get off too much of a tangent on this, but
Yeah.
in your estimation, what you know how people are like, oh, that's toxic.
Oh God, I have so much to say about that shit.
Yeah. Like what? How do you understand toxicity then? Like if there is no way of knowing,
Yeah.
then because I believe there's like gaslighting. I do believe in
Julie
like
made a good video on gaslighting, actually. I'll send it to you.
who did?
Julie Resch, she made a good
Oh,
video on
really?
gaslighting. Yeah. I mean,
Like
but yeah, go ahead.
basically, it's like I think you get my question based off
Mhm. Yeah, I think I do. And like it's a hard question to answer because it's filled with like almost like a moral sentiment.
yeah, definitely
Like,
send me the Julie Rush video because I'm
yeah, I'll have to send it to you because it was really good because I mean obviously Julie takes a more like tragic, pessimistic route, but like
yeah,
anyways,
it's good. I like that.
it's good because like if you think about it, like well, if a being was gonna hurt me anyways, then like if we're eventually like this is inevitable, honestly, like we hurt each other as beings. Let's just go with that function.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to understand suffering, you're trying to explain away suffering, and I would say like there's a part of gaslighting and there's a part of a lot of things that we try to explain away. But the whole thing about gaslighting is that gaslighting is often works with arbitrary values because it's like, well, if I'm like, how do we know gaslighting is happening versus just misunderstanding about what we want. You know what I mean? Like, because we assume, and I wrote a paper on like manipulation, where it's like the manipulator is also being manipulated because he has to manipulate himself to protect himself so that way he gets what he wants. But he has to do it so he doesn't feel vulnerable, because being in the open, not manipulating, doesn't mean he doesn't get what he wants.
Right.
Right.
Like the master manipulator, at that point, manipulation is so ambiguous because no one knows what's being manipulated.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that we would call that gaslighting, right? When the subject becomes confused about himself, being like, oh, wait, am I actually this? Like, it plays on the subject's identity about itself, because your partner is saying like, oh, actually, you're actually very abusive and emotionally manipulated. And they'd be like, no, I'm not. And it's like, well, your partner could be gaslighting you. Like, and maybe that's not true. But then there's also a part of this where it's like, if you think you're such a pure and good being, and if you thought the latter of just like, yeah, I do have flaws and so on, then like actually the claim that's being made against you would like be nonchalant, because like I think the moral valuations that's happening is like, what it is that we want the other being to be like another being, to be a certain way. We want to fashion our person in a certain way. Like, we want to conform to the image that we want, right? But then the person gives you another image of yourself and saying that this is what you are. But here's my thing. My thing is, we shouldn't be conforming each other to an image anyways. What's happening between the gaslighting thing is somebody's giving you an alternate image to yourself, saying that's you, and that's the gaslighting part, right? But then you're also gaslighting yourself by saying, this is my static me.
Okay.
Right? So like, that's the problem about gaslighting, is the people that are being gaslighted are also gaslighting themselves, because they're saying, this is the static version of me.
Yeah.
And so like, that's why I think it's a null conversation. I think it's a null conversation to even bring up, because what needs to be brought up is, why do you as a being think that I'm this way? And then I also need to put myself into question, and putting into to yourself into question is not always gaslighting. But that's the problem with the gaslight logic, is that it starts to assume that if you put yourself into question, that someone's gaslighting you, which isn't always true. So how do we delineate this arbitrary border between becoming and the static images of yourself, and then the images that your partner is putting forth? That is the fucking realm of space we're working with, in my opinion, is that you have a competing image of yourself and the other image is not true. Well, it could be, it could not be true. Like, we don't actually know like the whole situation. We're talking hypotheticals right now.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm just thinking, wouldn't there be gaslighting if there was like an intentional, and yes, you have to prove intent, but
That's another thing. Yeah.
and you're not being in tune with the context.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'll give like a ridiculous example.
Mm-hmm.
I have a girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
but she is trying. I have a girlfriend,
Yeah.
and I've stated I want monogamy. I want a monogamous relationship.
Yeah.
And then she says, okay, and then finds another guy
Mm-hmm.
and is saying basically, I'm not cheating on you.
Okay.
You just didn't accept what I want.
Okay. Okay.
So it's like, hold on. I entered this claiming monogamy.
Okay.
You're ignoring that context completely.
Okay. Yeah.
And you're making your rebuttal based off ignoring a whole part of the situation.
Hmm.
That to me would be gaslighting,
So
because
yeah.
like you said on the phone, just now on Zoom, like a gaslighter is gaslighting themselves.
Yeah. They
So
can.
that would be the case where she's gaslighting herself by ignoring part of the context here.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the question is, how do you? And I think you touched on it, but I guess I want more of like a
Yeah, I could touch on it
penetrating
more.
answer. Like,
Mhm.
how would you explain that it's not okay to overlook this context
So
without diminishing her own focus of the situation? Because
yeah.
she's
Yeah.
clearly not focusing on the whole situation
Mhm.
as I see it. She's
Okay.
focusing on the whole situation as she sees it.
Yeah, exactly. So so like I like this example where it's like the monogamy, because like, okay, let me put it this way. So what's not being asked is what's your definition of cheating? This is a very important question because different people have different conceptions of cheating. So like, for example, and like this is how you can quickly gaslight each other, because you're saying, well, you're cheating. And then you're like, no, I'm not. I'm not cheating. And then, but the girl believes that if you have emotional connection with another girl, you are cheating, right? So, but your definition of cheating, this is just an example. I'm not saying actually your definition of cheating is sexual relationships, right? This is like the stereotypical like male definition, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, no, I didn't cheat. I didn't cheat. I didn't do it. And she's like, yes, you did.
Right.
You did cheat, right? So if they were to accuse each other now and say, actually, you're gaslighting me because I didn't cheat, and she's going to be like, no, you did cheat. You're gaslighting me, trying to deny you're cheating. You see how tricky this gets. But the whole point is, what's not being asked is, and this is what I would say, is like, we're already accusing too quickly before saying, okay, what's your understanding of monogamy? Like, when I tell you monogamy, what are you thinking and envisioning? Okay. And then I'm going to tell you my thinking of what monogamy is, and then we can see the difference. Because if you thought monogamy was, and there's a possibility, like there's so much assumption happening within this relation that you even put forward, which is I told her I wanted monogamy and she's saying that she didn't break it. So I would say, okay, so what's your definition of monogamy? Because personally, my definition of monogamy doesn't match up with what you're saying. So
Right.
before accusing, we have to have that conversation of just being like, okay, so like, when I say monogamy, like, what do you mean? Like, what do you think of? Because
Right.
that doesn't come in my mind.
Like, let
That
me take the
conversation needs to
example.
happen.
Okay, I'm trying to find an example. I'm trying to find an example where the conversation doesn't need to happen. That's what you're talking about. So let me try here.
Okay, okay.
You find out that she's talking to another guy through an app, a secret app
Okay.
that deletes the messages.
Okay.
The whole point of the app is
Okay.
is being
Okay.
covert.
Okay. Okay.
Like, that is the point of the app. And you
Okay.
discover this covert app.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you, to me, giving a conversation
Yeah, yeah.
gives room for them to be able to not to reframe the situation.
It does. And like I think to me,
That's
like,
my problem with what you're saying is,
yeah,
I agree with what you're saying
yeah,
in most cases, but
yeah,
in the extreme cases where you have someone that's very egoistic
yeah.
and they are smart enough to to
Mhm.
gaslight themselves,
Mhm.
or basically to like make them not feel like the bad guy or feel, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair. But like, here's my thing though. Like, we just have to admit this because I think this is what gaslighting comes down to. Is just like you're hurt.
Yeah.
You're hurt. Like, and somewhat in a ways like gaslighting is kind of like a revenge counter on the person that hurt you.
Yeah.
That's all that it is, Luber. In my
Yeah.
opinion, that's all
No,
that
no, you're right. You're
like,
right.
you're just hurt. Like,
Yeah.
that's the Nietzschean take. Like, you're just hurt and you felt betrayed and your partner did it. Let's just give let's give the whole thing, right? Like, let's say you did all both have an understanding of the same definition of monogamy, and then she went behind your back, got on the app, did all this stuff. You discovered it. Now she's trying to deny it or whatever. But like,
No, it means nothing. It
but
means
like, it means
nothing.
nothing. Yeah, it means nothing because fundamentally, at the end of the day, it doesn't change that you feel hurt
Yeah.
and you feel betrayed. Like, that's it. She can
Yeah.
try to cover it up. She can do whatever. Like, I think we get so fixated sometimes on like what the other person is doing. Like, oh, you're trying to deny it. But like, who cares? Because at the end of the day, they can continue denying it. I don't like, if you've ever met a person, because I have, like, where they continuously deny, and this is like the gaslighting thing. It's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
You're just hurt.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else you can do about it because you're trying to like prove to them that they did this wrong to you, but you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
So like, so what do you do then? Do you just like continue exhausting yourself to like prove to them that they did this wrong? Like, why?
Right. But if they're not, I guess it's like, if they're okay, you say it doesn't matter, I'm hurt.
Yeah.
Then there's two possibilities to me that emerge. One is, let's say they don't respect that you're hurt.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
the second one is, oh, you're now you're avoiding the merits of the situation and you're making about your feeling, and it's almost detached from the merits of the situation. So in a
I
certain sense, you're now trying to control me
uh
based off of your feelings, not the facts.
yeah. So for my response for this is like the most brutal part, which is it's an absolute choice at that point.
Okay.
Okay, because I think like gaslighting is trying to avoid the partial object, in my opinion. Like, you're trying to, like, it's funny, right? Because gaslighting would try to think like, actually, there's a partial object because I'm being deceived, right? And I'm going to call it out. But the thing is that thing that you just pointed out was the person could keep denying it, could keep trying to twist it on you, and like
Mhm.
those happen. But like, that means that now the real encounter of the partial object happens, which is you can't prove it to them. They're in complete denial of it. They think actually you're still the crazy one. And so actually, the only thing that you have now is an absolute choice of self-preservation, which is you
Right.
say to yourself, I can't actually be in this relation because I just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it still doesn't change the fact that you're just still hurt from it and so on. Like, the gaslighting, the accusation doesn't even help anymore because it's like, if you encounter someone that's just like denying so fervently of anything, then like, you might as well just dip and just self-preserve. Like, that's it. It comes down to an absolute choice. And the risk is, and here's the scary part, you actually could be wrong. That might
Yeah.
be the scary part too, like, because you could be gaslighting yourself.
Right.
Right? Because I do imagine a situation like the best gaslighter, in my opinion, would be the one telling the other person that they're gaslighting.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And you wouldn't be able. Like, that's why I hate the logic of gaslighting, because it's like, to me, it avoids the absolute choice. It denies the partial object, and it just denies the brutality of suffering that you cannot explain away. You can't. Like, you're hurt, and like, that's it. You can try to explain away, you can try to prove it, but like, at this point, you're just trying to get a better feeling about your loss and your hurt by trying to prove to them that they did you wrong.
Right.
You know, like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's it. That's all it comes down to. Like, you know, and like, and that's the brutal part about like relationships, about like being like, it can get really ugly and it can get really painful and like, and so on. And like, all I can say is just like, at the end of the day, it's the most brutal feeling, the most painful suffering. And yet, what? You can't get that loss back. That's what dealing with lack is. You can't get that loss. And guess what? You would feel even worse if actually you misunderstood your partner.
Yeah.
And then your partner felt like actually you did such a wrong to her because you didn't trust her, that now she can't even look at you anymore and she has to quit.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it could go fucking either way. You know what I mean? Like, as much force as you had in your conviction, it could fall on your head with that much force. Just because you are working with impartial information, judgments, passions, feelings. And like, to me, I mean, honestly, I just never find it helpful just to even work in that paradigm of gaslighting.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I just don't like.
Well,
That's why I don't
point
like
well taken. Point well taken. Well, if this part of the conversation doesn't reveal that I was once someone who has said you're gaslighting me, uh, yeah, yeah,
I mean, it's painful. Like, I think that's
just
the
got me
real
thinking, how
thing.
am I gaslighting myself? Because I definitely I see your point.
Mhm. To
Yeah,
me, this is the part. Like, to me, this is like, I think this is the part. Like, actually, like, relationships need like a kind of like aftercare, more of like forgiveness, being like, actually, instead of focusing so much on what happened, it's more just like focusing and just like, this is like kind of like the psychoanalysis part, like actually focusing the being of your hurt. You know, like, I was hurt and there's nothing that I can do about it. I should talk about it. I should express how hurt I feel, how betrayed I feel. And yet it's like, it's okay to be wrong. Like, you could have, your judgment could be wrong, but it doesn't deny that you felt betrayed. Like, that's the part.
yeah,
That's the part that people like tend to throw away. They think that if I can't prove it, then my feeling's invalid. That's how you gaslight yourself.
yeah,
But that's not true. Your judgment could be wrong, but your feelings could be valid. And that's okay. You know,
yeah,
like, that's okay. But like, it's very hard to like feel that's okay,
yeah, totally.
you know? And
Uh-huh.
like, I think that's like, to me, that's a lot of the conversation that's like missing in like a lot of relationships, where it's like, if my judgment is wrong, then my feeling is wrong and I'm being gaslighted.
Right.
Your feelings can still be valid and a judgment can be wrong. That's possible. It can happen. And sometimes it could match up. Like, fucking who knows, dude? The
Yeah.
problem is like, you feel hurt, betrayed, like, that's the main thing. And it's like, how do you deal with that? And the real question is, will you actually feel better if you prove it to your partner? You know what I mean? Like, I think about that all the time. Like, okay, you prove that they're cheating. They still cheated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they still cheated. Shit. And like, someone could say, well, it feels worse that they continue to deny it. It's like, that's their problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If
Mm-hmm.
they're continuing to deny it, that's their problem. You could say, oh, they're gaslighting me, but you know what they did. You know what they did. Like, so don't fixate on like they're denying it, because you're just causing yourself more hurt at that point.
Yeah.
Like, just fixate on the fact that like you're hurt, and like, that's it. Like, you're not going to get a remedy from it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what? Your partner saying sorry is going to help fixing that they cheated for like 2 years? No, it's not. No, it's not. Like, you're still gonna feel so betrayed. You're gonna be like, "That's nice, thank you," but like, I don't think I can be in this relationship anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so whether we prove it, disprove it, or not, or like they disprove it or whatever, like, to me, that matters so little in relation to the fact that like the feeling is what's persistent. The feeling is
Right.
what endures.
Right. I guess the question then is like, when is the feeling not okay? Like, when are your feelings so disassociated from reality? Because, like, let's say you're with someone that's schizo,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
then you can't just go based off how they feel, because how they feel is like might not pertain to anything of of the facts. Like, there is still this relation between the facts of the matter and the
Mm-hmm.
feelings that emerge out of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
I like
Well, the schizo does reveal something interesting because it's like it reveals that you can't even blame them. Like,
right,
it's a more brutal, and like this is why I always like Julie Resch's like negative psychoanalysis, which is like at the end of the day, we're really just talking about suffering and like misunderstanding, misjudgments, perspectives about life that we disagree about. Like, you know, you could say like, oh, if the girl cheated on me, like I really wish she would have just told me she just wanted to explore, you know? Like that could have been easily remedied. Um,
yeah,
but it wasn't. And so now you're dealing with like the pain of like they cheated because they decided to be in a monogamous relationship, which they weren't ready for, and
right,
so on. And it's
right,
like
right,
all things that if you knew beforehand, you would have been like, are you sure you want to be in this relationship? Because if you don't, like I'm willing to, you know, leave it open for you. And I'll just, you know, try to explore myself, find somebody that wants maybe a more monogamous relationship or so on. Like could have been better, but it's like we didn't know. We didn't know better. We didn't know to ask. We didn't know they had a different definition or whatever, or like, you know, all these things. Um,
right.
but when it comes to like neurodivergence specifically, like actually you can't blame them. It actually becomes more brutal in the sense that they're not free to be blamed.
Right.
And then you have to deal with your internal gripe about what's happening. You're like, because if this was a normal person, I would fucking yell at them,
Right.
you know? But
Yeah.
like, but like to me, like that's lack, man. Like that is fucking lack right there. When you cannot give that lack away, you know, like you cannot throw it in the face of your partner. Instead, you have this like neurodivergent person that you're like, okay, rationally, like I can't yell at them because like they think so off the chart from me that it would be wrong for me to do so.
Right.
But I still feel so angry, so resentful about what's happening. And like to me, that question is more about like, okay, when that happens, how do you relate to lack then? You know?
Wow. Yeah. I mean,
This is why I started thinking about negative pragmatism.
my reaction is almost like you have like it's not right. Like what I'm about to say is just totally not right. Like you just have to ignore it because it's just so
Well, see,
so
that's dissociating.
like you know what I mean though. Like it's like, oh my god, this is so
Yeah,
stressful
yeah.
that I'm just gonna have to ignore it.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gonna have to bury it underneath.
Yeah,
Which is
no,
like,
no, it's the perfect temptation for it. It really is. It's
it's
it's the perfect temptation to do that. I mean, like, I won't deny, like,
taking
I've definitely done that before. Like, it's so tempting. And like, this is why I had even framed the question to myself of like, oh, what's the difference between up like what's the word? What's the difference between suppression and letting go? You know, like no repression. What's the difference between repression and letting go? Like that was when I was like, oh shit. because
Oh
dissociating
yeah, I don't know.
dissociating looks like letting go. It looks like it. But I
Yeah.
would say one key feature is what's happening is, and I think it's not really the subject's fault either. And this is the other thing is like you're trying to deal with the situation. You know it's not the person's fault, but then also you don't have a possibility or another possibility to deal with the emotions that you're feeling. And so you're just like, well, I'm just gonna ignore it, but ignoring it looks like letting go. Like you're just
Right.
like, okay, like I'm fine, I'm good. Like, but the only key feature is if it returns in a more drastic manner, that's when you
Classic.
be like, ah shit, like maybe I need to deal with this.
Okay. Do you have an answer to that?
I mean, that's why I was provoked to take therapy. Because I do think like really this is the psychoanalysis part, which is more like you have a narrative about said situation. And when you read Freud and Lacan and all them, it's more about how do I get you to retell that story? And then how do I get you to slightly change the way you think about a story just a little bit differently?
Yeah, without at the same time
Denying.
denying or being delusional
Yeah,
about,
exactly. Exactly.
because it can't.
Because, go ahead.
Sorry.
Well, because really the cure is like not really a cure, but more just like getting you to think the possibilities within that story
Right.
of interpreting what you're witnessing, because you could say what's so harmful and repressive is the fact that you can only think of one way of the story.
Right.
So you're just like, ah, fuck, you're like, ah, fuck, like this really fucking sucks. I can't blame the person, but I am so angry, mad, upset, and it's like, that's when you need another person to talk to like show you there's another way to think about that story,
Right.
you know? And like that's really it, like we're beings with language. Like we're telling ourselves like the situation in our head and it's fucking getting us angry.
Right.
Like he always fucking does this shit, like fucking makes me mad, but I can't fucking yell at him because he's fucking, incapable. He's fucking like, in a wheelchair, like whatever. Like, can't fucking yell at him, like I got legs. I should be grateful. It's like, well, beings are more contradictory than that. Like you're gonna be angry, you're gonna be mad, you're gonna be like, I don't fucking care. He's got no fucking legs. Like, like I'm gonna beat his ass.
Right.
Like, but like that's the thing though. It's like you're telling yourself a story that
It's a
is the
lot,
same.
it's a
It's
lot
linear.
easier.
It's a lot easier. Yeah.
Well, it's a lot easier when it's like shit that I'm doing, where it's like I'm writing a script.
Mm-hmm.
It's way easier to detach yourself and be like, oh, it's changed. But when it's your own story,
Mm-hmm.
like for me personally, I don't know. Like I can't apply the same principles that I do with my storytelling to myself.
Well, like that's what I'm saying. Like, actually, that's what I told my partner. Like, I think like a week ago, I said, if I'm being honest, negative pragmatism, like, it rooted with myself because like I have a really hard time dealing with failure. I was like, I'm very self-conscious about it. Like, because I want to do good for people. Like, I'm very like people person, you could say, people pleaser, and that comes with its own like toxic effects on me. But like,
Right.
but like failing, but like the thing that happened to me was that I'm a people pleaser, but like I'm failing to please.
Mm-hmm.
So that puts you in a fucking horrible relationship with the world and beings, and you're just like, well, what do I do? And then like negative pragmatism starts surfacing in this sense for myself. because I'm like, okay, like nothing is working. What do I do? Well, now it's more like, how do I deal with my lack or the fact that I'm always working with a partial object when I'm trying to please people?
Right.
And it might have to do more with accepting the fact that, like, accepting my own folly with attempting to please. Like, actually, I don't know what they want, and they don't know what I want. So, like, there's always a constant misunderstanding happening.
Right.
Then how do you live with that? How do you have a relationship with the world with that? How do you deal with beings and yourself when there is failure, when there is that misunderstanding, versus always almost dissociating with yourself saying, okay, there's a solution to this. I know there is. Like, to me, that can be an avoidance of that issue. Like, actually dealing with, like, the helplessness, the uselessness of yourself in what to do. You know, it can be a cope to always find a solution. It really can. Like, you know,
Yeah.
it can be a cope. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to find some remedies or some, like, provisional things to do, but, like, you know, it always made me wonder, like, okay, like, why is this feeling so hard? It's because
Yeah.
I don't want to abide in it.
I feel like what you're saying is very provocative because it opens like a can of worms in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that, like, I mean, the question is when to hold, like you've already said it. It's like when to hold on and when to let go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
like there doesn't seem to, and then like even finding an answer to that, is that like a way for you to let go of the tension in finding an answer, or holding on to the fact, like it's still within that same short circuit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Like, there isn't really an answer. It's really like a choice at the end of the day. Like, that's what we're trying to avoid, almost like an absolute choice. Because
Yeah.
what it means to make an absolute choice is getting to that awareness of, like, well, how do I know the difference between letting go and moving on? Like, when do I make the move to move on, and when do I make the move to continue on instead of let go? Like, how do I make those moves? It's like, well, actually, there isn't. Like,
Right.
you just have to do it. Like, there's nothing else, because everything else is impartial judgment that you're working off, you know? And so, like, you're actually kind of fooling yourself if you think the solution will solve it for you,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. So then what's the drive here? What is making one?
I think it's the problem. This is what actually Nietzsche, this is actually what Nietzsche made me think about. Like, the drive actually is the fact that we're presented with a problem. Like, life is problematic,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And, like, if you think about it, like, if life didn't pose us a question, would we have a drive? What would be our drive if we didn't have any problematics involved? You
Right.
know? Like, yes, we want to, like, yes, the inclination is to say we're searching for truth and we're searching for answers, but, like, actually, like, for Nietzsche, is like, actually, it's because life deceived us. That's why we're looking.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, that deception of life from life is necessary,
Right.
or we wouldn't
Yeah.
have been looking.
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
Totally.
life gives us this problem. Um, and, like, life is always problematic.
Yeah.
And, like, it's hard. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, the conversation about suffering is, like, unbearable. Like, we want an answer to this. We're like, okay, how do we explain it? Why is there suffering?
Well,
Well, go ahead.
th- sorry, I really am enjoying what you're saying. Like in art making or like storytelling, in my case, it's really easy to know when to stop.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like the problem. It's like you could always make it better. Like I could always make tweaks of the story and make it better, but it's like basically, am I able to answer all the questions?
Mm-hmm.
Am I able to understand the origin of the story?
Mm-hmm.
That's when you stop.
Yeah.
So trying to extrapolate that, I don't know if it's something that you can take that methodology and
Mm-hmm.
apply it to your own life.
I will say yes and I will say no. I think it's because it goes back to what Daniel was talking about with like it's an analogy.
Mm-hmm.
And analogies is similar but also dissimilar. And the gap that we're left with when we try to map storytelling to our lives is precisely that. Like it's an analogy. But like like I would say it's a very good one. It's a very
I know,
good
but the problem, I agree with that, but it's,
one.
I agree with that, but there's like life is syllogistic. Like this is going back to me and Jockin's conversation
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
And like life is like tautology based, syllogistic.
Mm-hmm.
So is a story though.
Yeah.
That's where I understand like
Well,
the
the difference
difference.
is because we're in the story.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
That's the thing. Like we're in the story though. Like you're writing the story. You're not in the story. Like
Right.
you're able to like alternate between interior and exterior because you're like, oh, what makes a good story? Well, when the character comes across a problem and he has to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, and if it's a really good problem, it makes it for a really good story. Like, oh shit, this is good. What is he gonna do?
Right.
That's when the story's so attractive. It's like, what is he gonna do? But the thing is about us is like, well, we're constantly thrown into this situation where it's like, is there something I'm supposed to do? like, is there something I'm supposed to do? Like, it's not, it's like we're the characters, but like we don't know if like we're constantly going through different stories. Like
Yeah, no, that is the problem. That
that's
is
the
the
problem.
problem. I mean, like I don't want to get like too technical into like my book, but there's a feature of theme called the operation, which like when you're focusing on your story, like I don't focus on my main character at all.
Mm,
Like I focus on the operation in which he's a part of.
nice.
So like not to I feel like you get a sense of what I mean by the operation, but it's essentially
Yeah, I get kind of a sense.
it's the subject. It's basically like if you think about life, the subject isn't just the subject, but all the components of the environment that help make the subject the subject.
Mm,
So that's one aspect of the operation. The other aspect of the operation is all the worldly elements that negate what the subject is.
mm-hmm.
So like I'll give an example. I'm driving my car and I'm driving really fast. I'm late to work. Well, the subject in it isn't just me, but it's my car. It isn't just me, but it's also the road. It's like everything that gives rise to me being a subject is actually the subject itself.
Yeah,
And
like this
sorry.
makes me think of like Game of Thrones. Or
Okay.
like Ned Stark. Well, like he was like my favorite character. Like first episode, 2 episodes, I was so sad that they killed him. I was like, what the fuck? Like, is it even worth watching Game of Thrones after this? And like, but the thing is, like, Game of Thrones doesn't give a fuck about the characters. It's the operation.
Right.
That's what makes it Game of Thrones. You're like, oh shit, they're willing to kill off like a character I love.
Right.
Like, because you thought that was going to be the impetus to keep the story going,
Right, but it's not.
but it's not.
So just to finish explaining the operation, and then I want to try to say what's the operation of life for a second
Uh-huh.
of your life, my life, because it would be a different operation.
Yes.
So we have like the road, the car, me driving in it. That's part of this. The one aspect of the operation. The other aspect of the operation is the speed sign saying 35. I'm going 60. I have no consideration. Like that speeding sign has nothing to do with my subjectivity. It has to do with the worldly feature in which the subjective aspect of the operation is situated in.
Okay.
So I say ego ethics. Ego is not just me, but the things that make me me. And then the ethics is everything else that is the
Oh,
it's
gotcha.
it's literally everything else that it's neat. It's part of my subjectivity, but it's not in a direct relation. It's an indirect relation to my subjectivity.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think okay. Yeah. It's
So
funny because like I'm actually thinking of like of Rosenvik. Um, like he divided his like whole thing of like there's like the individual, the world, and then like I forgot what else he called it. Like I think there's like the ethical or something like that. Like it was crazy. Like there's the you, and then there's like the world, but
mm-hmm,
like the world has an otherness to itself,
mm-hmm,
and then like that whole relation with each other actually brings out a third, which is like the ethics.
right. I see that. I see what. So okay. So like with that said, like in a story, typically you you construct your story so you have all the components. So it's like don't let love change your family, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
You understand, let's just say, love as the ethics component. So
Mm-hmm.
everything that's not giving rise to your subjective disposition, where the family is actually everything about it is giving rise to your subjective disposition. So you're constructing the entire story where it's like you are making the world basically the explicit world and the implicit world. And the implicit world that you're making is basically shaping the edges of the explicit world that you're making.
Okay. This
So
can get really blurry because like the way you're talking about this.
very blurry.
Yeah.
Very
Let me give an example to see if it like it's maps onto what you're talking about.
yeah.
Okay. So the way I'm understanding is the ego self is in direct relation to things. So like it would be like my car, right? Like I would associate my car with myself because like the way it is, it's like dirty or something. Like I keep it clean. Like I
Like
keep my car
the,
clean.
the
I like my
computer the
fast.
computer right now, the chair that you're sitting in,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
room that you're in, that's
Okay.
all part of the ego. But like a thing that's like ethics in a certain sense, I'm just being crude, is like
Like the
it's
speeding sign.
the speeding side, but it's like it's daylight outside.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Like it,
Okay.
it it's not changing per se the
Uh-huh.
immediacy of your moment,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but in a certain sense, it's actually shaping the immediacy of your moment.
Okay. But
Because let's say it's not daytime and it's nighttime, and it's like, well, at nighttime I can't be here. I have my girlfriend at nighttime. Like the
got it. Got it. Like, let me give this example to see if it maps on because like there's some words I can't like understand well.
yeah,
Because like I'm thinking this, okay, I'm thinking about like two scenarios, but like it kind of blurs the distinction where it's just like, okay, let's say like two characters that go to like a subway, okay, and they like
okay,
meet up there, right? Like you would tell me like the ethics of the situation is like it's daytime, and like they decided, okay, I'm gonna go out to eat because now it's the time to eat lunch, okay, but that subway is not a part of the self, right?
Uh-huh.
But here's where it gets blurry. If one of the characters was the subway owner, okay, I'll read that
Yeah,
after.
but do your thing.
If the character was the subway's, if the character was a subway owner of that store, then that would not longer be the ethic, but a part of the ego, because he is the owner of that store, a part of himself,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like you could easily imagine two different scenes where it's like there's just this subway and two characters are just eating there to meet up and talk. But then that scene could easily be different if it's like the subway owner so happens to be one of the characters eating there, and then the girl goes, "This food sucks." Like it changes the whole thing,
Yeah.
right? Because if he wasn't the subway owner of that store, then like, yeah, like it doesn't matter. Doesn't
Right.
affect me. Like maybe it does suck, right? But like
Right.
if he's the subway owner and maybe the other character doesn't know he's a subway owner, he just decided to meet there because actually he's on break or whatever. Like
Right.
tried to cleverly do this like an on break kind of thing. And the girl's
Uh-huh.
like, actually, this food sucks. Like that blurs everything. But like you could see how as you're watching the story, you wouldn't know because the character hasn't revealed himself to be the subway owner. It's just two characters sitting in a subway talking.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly, like, it becomes a part of the ego. If I'm understanding this correctly, like, let me put this question: if he is a subway owner, does that become a part of the ego?
Um,
The subway itself, like the subway place.
yeah. I mean, how you determine forgot to put this one part. For example, that. But yeah, no, you're exactly right in terms of how blurry, like how the lines can cross very quickly, and like it's very yeah, no, you're yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Let me know if what I said made sense. I forgot for some reason it didn't paste.
Ego describes a protest and foretelling the values of one element. Okay, so the way I'm understanding the the ego is like basically like what one values in
Mm-hmm.
relation to things.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
What
and
world, and then what the world values in relation to things.
and that
It,
would be the ethics.
right. And,
Okay. Yeah.
and like that,
Okay.
but like how you define, so it's like again, for the subway example, if it's the owner, it is a value for yourself at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Where it's not, if it's not the owner, it's just a worldly value that's there, that's part of the implicit environment that's needed for there to be an explicit awareness in that implicit environment.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Okay. Yeah, I get that now.
Um,
Because like I think values to things, and then the world's values to things that really frames it like better for me. Like ethics would be the world's values to things, like the social construct value to things. Like obviously we value a subway there and like as a society somehow, some way, like
right,
we allow it to happen, right?
right,
But then like my ego values could be like Subway sucks, so I don't go to Subway, I go to Chipotle, right?
right,
Like, and that would be my ego self and in its relation to things.
right. So,
Okay. Yeah.
okay, so now to tie in the gaslighting conversation
Okay.
into when you're thinking in terms of the operation, which is like the ego ethic. So it's not just you as an individual
Yeah.
anymore. It's now gaslighting in terms of this grand operation, which you are just a derivative of.
Yes.
how I would say that maybe gaslighting is not the best word, but there's
Yeah.
like there's something not virtuous afoot when there is no awareness of the operation. There's only awareness of yourself. If you're dealing with someone and
Yeah.
you're dealing with them in terms of only thinking yourself and
Mhm.
not thinking through the operation which you and the other are derivatives of, then
Mhm.
that would be quote unquote gaslighting. And then to me, that's something provable because you can have a conversation where you can show, you can ask questions and see where their focus is.
Yes. Um.
This is all based off of thinking ontology as
Mhm.
relational. Because if you aren't, if you first of all, if you have no awareness of the ontological stakes involved, then
Yeah.
it's like the schizophrenic in a way. It's like you can't you just feel bad that they can't even participate. But if they have the ability, if they have the awareness of those like ontological relation stakes,
Mhm.
then to me, like let me know if I'm making sense here. But
I think you are. Um. Let me just recap. Like what you're saying. So like you're saying like if 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 the person thinks like that there isn't a world in relation to things, that is just themselves in relation to things.
it's not even it's even further than that. It's those things
Yeah.
are just extensions of me.
Themselves. Yeah, yeah. So like
It's
what I'm saying is like, yeah, yeah. So like what I'm saying is like if they're not aware of that, like they're not aware it's a perspective.
right,
Like because they think it is, like they don't even think it's a worldview. They just think it's like a world. Like the
right,
world. They think it's the world, not a worldview.
right. Or
Um,
like a really easy, a cool example, not cool, but like just a simple example is like you're sitting on your couch watching TV, and then your girlfriend comes rushing into the room, and she's like, "I just got into a horrible car accident, and I'm so fucked up from it mentally. I just saw someone die." And then you turn to them and you say, "I don't have the emotional capacity to deal with this right now." That to me is saying that you are seeing the other as an extension of your own capacity and not and not being aware at all of this grander operation which you're a derivative of.
okay, so this is gonna get messy. This is gonna get messy because so there is some elements because what that conversation is about, if we're using your hypothetical situation here,
Yeah. Yeah.
is that how do we distinguish between moments of self-preservation? Because this is actually Nietzsche's argument. Like the awareness is brutal. The awareness is not like this wonderful thing to be aware about. By the way, like it's not like to be aware that the extension of your world is
Uh-huh.
actually not a part of you. That makes you feel so small
Oh,
and
see,
helpless.
I feel the opposite. It's like
I know,
liberating.
but I know, but okay. So this is what I will answer to your question is there's different temperaments. This is actually Nietzsche's answer. There's different temperaments that can't handle this. And
Mm-hmm.
I agree that I think you and I are probably more in that line. But I
Mm-hmm.
will say, and this is what I was telling you about earlier, like before on Instagram, where I was like, there's a certain degree of deception necessary for us to be in the world.
Okay.
That's the problem with having, and like this is actually poses a really interesting question because like Nietzsche is harping on like you need to be aware like that our fucking values are fucking groundless and then we can change them and create them. But like at the same time, Nietzsche's also doing this weird move where he's like, actually, we have to let it be. We have to let not nihilism ride through. We have to let it happen. Like, this is the problem that I'm having, which is like, okay, so first of all, let me put it this way. My first inclination, Luber, is I agree with you. Okay. I have an aversion to people's lack of awareness to such things. I do. But we get then stuck in this ironic move where we start to become not understanding about people's lack of awareness. Because at one point, we were those people. So how do you treat beings when they have not yet caught themselves in that unfolding?
Right.
That to me,
that's
is actually the question.
That's a real. That is. I'm curious what Daniel would have to say about that, because that is the question of belonging. Because the real problem with belonging is that.
Yes. Yeah.
Because most have not.
Yes. Yeah.
And then for you to try to make someone be aware of their own unfolding, you will be demonized.
Yeah. I mean, because like the only thing that, I mean, this is, I think now we're going into like a realm of like the science of like encounterology.
Yeah.
Okay. Because this is where like everybody starts deviating in their different ways about how to approach this, like Buber, Levinas, and all that, and Deleuze, because they're all really trying to answer this, like, okay, like how do you actually encounter a being without trying to impose upon them?
Yeah.
How? Like, and there's so many ways to do it, but I think in combination with like an absolute choice, I would say like, I want this conversation. Like I would want future conversations. I'm not talking specifically about this one, but like it's included. I was like, I would want future conversations where we don't moralize the awareness and the lack of awareness itself. That I think there needs to be an ethics. And this is why I was thinking about like an after ethics, like an aftercare, because it's like, there needs to be a kind of like forgiveness, and like, because Daniel talks about this too, like if one cannot be aware, here's the thing. Do we continue to hold grudge and resentment against those that are not aware?
I mean, if this isn't revealing, my knee-jerk response is yes.
Well, I appreciate you for your honesty.
I mean, seriously, like,
yeah. Well, I like
part of me's like, fuck you.
Well, like that's the thing. Like, I understand you in that sense. Like, I really do. Because, like, as much as I am fucking fighting for an understanding, I know that I'm a fool, and I would be probably right there with you in the sense of just like, I'll be yelling at the person like, fuck you too. Like, I'd be like yelling at the guy like, fuck you for not knowing.
Well, it's just like, I'd like to think when I have a conversation with someone and there's a problem, I'm very good at turning that problem and making it into something beautiful.
Yeah.
Like I'm very good at getting someone riled up. It's it's not even something good at. It just so happens to be the case. I get someone riled up, and then we run the course of that, and then we come to some amazing understanding about each other.
Okay.
If you can't do that with me, then I'm like, fuck you, because I'm like very, very relational. I'm very open-minded, you know, but like, if you can't have the conversation with me, if you can't even have the discourse with me, then it is a little bit of a fuck you, because I'm like, are you even a human? Like, my mind goes like not thinking I'm that great or something, but it's like, are you even like a human being? Like, what are you?
But here's the thing. As much as we need an encounterology, we also need a self-preservation.
Yeah.
Ethics. We need a self-preservation ethics, because this attempting to encounter beings, like, we have to understand that beauty is not only just beautiful, but tragic. And I think when we encounter that moment when the other is still caught in his unfolding and not aware, and it feels like a fuck you, then like I would say this is the moment when we realize like beauty is also terrifying. It's tragic. Like because of this specific encounter, like you can't do anything about this. The only thing you can do is like endure it, abide in it with that encounter. But then, and this is the part that I've been thinking through Nietzsche, is like, okay, well, this is the part where I'm tempted after my encounter with beauty as tragedy is I'm tempted to be resentful and have revenge because like fucking just eliminate all of them then. Like that. I mean, that's usually the tempting conclusion. But if that's the tempting conclusion, then I'm no different from the dogmatist that says, well, fucking annihilate all of them. You know? Like it's the same logic in some sense, but like you become aware of that feeling, aware of like how quick and easy it is to collapse yourself into a do something ugly.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when I would say beauty becomes beautiful in its tragedy. But then we need moments of self-preservation, which is how do we recover to encounter beauty again when we failed?
Right.
When it was tragic. And like to me, Nietzsche is trying to answer this question because like fucking dude, man, the preface of Human All Too Human was like the saddest shit I ever fucking read. Because Nietzsche said, it says a book for free spirits, right? He says in the preface, he goes, I invented the notion of free spirits to feel less alone. Okay? Like the fact that he did this to feel less alone, to feel like he could belong, because this is what would happen. If you encounter beauty as tragedy, then you feel alienated. Because the person that's not aware doesn't feel alienated.
Yeah.
It's we that feel alienated.
Right.
And then it's we that don't belong.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
But
I
that's the care. That's the care that's needed though. Like I think encounterology is pivotal, but I'm like, what do we do after the encounter?
well, that's like the story is after the encounter.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like I'm saying, like we need like an ethics, we need a science of self-preservation. Because a science of self-preservation allows for the preparation of the encounter to keep trying to encounter it, but it doesn't undermine the fact that beauty can be tragic and beauty can be so self-annihilating that perhaps I can't recover. But the thing is, how do we recover when it annihilates us, when we feel alone, when we feel not belonging
Right.
in the world? Like to me, like saying like, okay, that's just story. Like I get it, but like to me, it doesn't give me a source of like, okay, but what do we do, or what can we attempt to do when we feel so annihilated by this beauty as tragedy, if we encounter it as that encounter?
Yeah.
Because that really hinges on whether you'd be willing to do it again.
Well, what about like the notion of beauty as a comedia?
A comedia, like a comedy, like is that?
Because like in my mind, it's beauty strikes, the theme reveals itself, and then the story could either be a comedy or tragedy. But I
Yeah, like
understand,
tragic comedy.
right? Like
Yeah, right, yeah.
to an end, like there is an ending which makes it tragic, but there's also like the tragic component of like the beauty, the beauty, the beatific vision occurring and then it dissipating and you forgetting it, and
Mhm.
or you having to come to grips with it. Like the tension of it is very stressful.
That's also tragic and funny.
Right.
Right, because like I mean, somebody watching it would find it funny. It's like, oh, this guy fucked
Exactly.
up again.
Like I was talking to Michelle like about my food thing that I'm doing for fun on Instagram
Hmm.
and stuff. I find people laughing at my own pain funny. Like making it a joke, even though it's really real for me. There's something hilarious about that.
Yeah. So like this is the thing that like I guess when I am trying to get at, and you're getting at it too. It's like when Nietzsche's like we need the ability to laugh.
Uh-huh.
Like I don't think it's like I do think physical laughter is included, but like he's meaning something existential when he's saying like the ability to laugh, the ability to affirm life and
Mm-hmm.
whatever was necessary. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think a part of realizing like, okay, the fact that people walk around not aware of themselves and the world is a part of that necessity, because then life wouldn't be a problematic for us. Like we wouldn't be having this conversation if people could just do it.
Yeah, no. I don't think the best, besides like actually telling stories
Yeah.
and like having some like foundation for that. Besides that, when it comes to philosophy and stuff, all I think I've contributed is having some psychotechnology. That's not an answer. That's not like a science. That's a psychotechnology where
Yeah.
the form of measuring toward what would be a science. Like
Yeah.
science is using a tool, some form of technology
Mm.
to do the science, but it's not the science itself. Like I'm not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'm gonna take on a walk right now. What you're suggesting is the science itself, and that's why you're like, yes, I understand what you mean by story, but it's not really getting to what I'm the preservation part. I completely agree. Hold on, I'm just gonna join on my phone.
Yeah. Because I mean, no, I mean, I totally agree
I
with you.
think basically whatever that science is will have to deal with um the let's see join now.
This call.
Whoa. Basically whatever the science is going to be, it's going to have to deal with that measuring tool.
I feel like that scene right there was like the perfect encounter of like the world in relation to things and like the person in relation to things, where you see like the double and like, whoa.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Because I feel like that's what would happen. Like you would be like, whoa.
Yeah. Oh man. I like whatever that science is, it's just going to have to deal with the type of measuring of a whole. Because like preservation, it's always going to be in the relation to the whole of the self.
Yeah.
So that's why I think the measuring tool has to be storytelling.
Yeah, and I think included in your storytelling as a psychotechnology is like, to take Nietzsche's point, is like when we come up with this science and we use the tool, we have to understand that actually we still have to function with a certain measure of deception.
Right. That's
Like, ironically, if we don't uh if we don't play with a certain measure of deception, actually we will be kind of doing, like, in my opinion, like a kind of real brutality to the other, because it's like now we're forcing them to encounter truth, a truth that could annihilate them on the spot if they're not ready and prepared within their unfolding to encounter said truth.
yeah.
So it's like we have to allow a certain degree of deception, but then it's like, okay, yeah, deception, but like, how do we actually relate to degrees of deception in allowing unfolding to happen? Like that would be the science. Like that's like trying to answer the encounterology. And then it's like, okay, but then after we use this science, because there seems to be like a cost with doing this science, in my opinion, like the encounterology, which is like, well, then how do we self-preserve ourselves? Because Nietzsche's saying, like, in some ways, in order to recover, to continue the science, we need to deceive ourselves again.
Yeah, I mean, that's why. So like,
that's why it's a tragic comedy, right? Like you were talking about, like
right. I mean, the beauty. The beauty of storytelling is that you're lying.
yeah.
Like that, but it's just not the same as the lie in the colloquial sense.
Yeah, that's right. It's
because it's a virtuous lie. It's like the noble lie that Plato talks about.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that, like the noble lie, because like people condemn lying, like, oh, like it should never, like we should always have translucency. But the thing is, like, once you reach this level of awareness, like you realize, like, translucency, the only translucency is that there's no translucency. You only have partial objects. So like actually we do need the lie, and that would actually be understanding that's a part of the translucency. Like
Right.
we need the deception.
Right.
Because as beings, like things can overwhelm us and scare us and deter us. And then we react in like certain ways that like would prevent any future encounters from happening. So it's like, and I think like a master storyteller is kind of like, how do we position the being in a sense where he doesn't run away from the problem? It's like he goes, yeah, I have to encounter this problem and I have to respond.
Yeah.
Yeah, because then it wouldn't be a good story if they're like you're like building up this climax and then the character just goes, yeah, that's not a problem. I'm glad they took my daughter. You know what I mean? Like you'd be like, what? Like, what? Like, holy shit, you're happy your daughter got kidnapped?
It just wouldn't make sense. You would just
it wouldn't make any sense. No. I mean, it would be funny. Like, that would be a comedy. Like,
that'd be like a sketch.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it has to be something to where, like, you're positioning the being to, like, he can't escape. Like, and it's not like he's being, it's not like he has people holding him down. Like, he has to respond. Like, he legitimately goes, I am so involved in this that there is nothing but to respond.
Right.
Like, he's not being convinced. Like, it is something so deeply pertinent to him that it's like, it's almost a way to fool the ego extension into responding to itself.
Right.
I don't know how I feel about that though, but yeah.
No, I mean, when you scream down an echo chamber, you begin to hear yourself and the other.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I take what you're saying, because you start hearing and it gets further and further away, and then it becomes foreign to you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain foreignness via the distance of the sound, where it's no longer your sound. It's the chambers.
Yeah. I forget like what Eber would call this. Like I think he'd be like, this is when like you're going from the determinate to the indeterminate, but like you can do that phenomenologically by like repetition. You can like repeat the same word and it starts to sound meaningless.
Yeah.
But like what's funny about that is like the repetition actually creates a kind of distance from you and the word.
Yeah.
And then you're like, that's weird. What the fuck does this word even mean? Like I say it all the time. And now it just looks weird. Now it looks really weird. Now it looks bizarre. Like, what are letters?
Right. No, exactly.
Yeah.
I have to call the client that I'm seeing at 2:00 because the address that they have given me isn't a real one. can I just call him and hop right back on? Or you gotta bounce?
Yeah, I mean, I do gotta bounce.
Okay.
I do think, yeah, we'll bounce. We'll cut this because I think we talked for like 2 hours.
Yeah, that
Actually,
was good.
yeah, it was good. I think that was good. I think it's good for today, actually, because I do have some stuff I got to take care of. Plan
Okay.
on taking care of. So yeah, no, this is good. This is really good, actually.
We didn't really get into, I feel like, what we planned on talking about, but in a way we did.
Yeah. I mean, like, honestly, like, I don't even know if it's like, I'm not gonna say like it's not worth talking about, but like, I think like this conversation like made the scope so broad that it's like it kind of diminished. Like, I feel like if we were gonna talk about that, like, we really need to talk about this.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, because I
I
think like we really got at like what would this science look like? Because obviously, like, there's some things that are just like left open. Like, there's some real problems that like we'd have to respond to, and if we didn't construct a science of it, like, what would we be doing then?
right.
You know,
Right.
with this like psychotechnology and stuff like that.
Right. I mean, I don't know if you follow Stephen Wolfram at all, but
Mhm.
his tool that he calls the Ruliad is very interesting. It reminds me a lot about just my conception of theme,
Yeah.
but um, that conversation that I sent you on Instagram definitely is circling. Like, part of the problem that they're having is that there isn't a science of beauty in a certain sense. There isn't a science of preservation because they don't know what is being preserved. Like, that's what they're. It's like one person, and I agree with Wolfram when he doesn't love the word consciousness. Neither do I, because I think it's too much of a derivative.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I can
like
see that.
so like, what are we preserving? One will
Mhm.
say consciousness, but then it's like, what
It
is
becomes
consciousness?
pathological, really.
Right. Like, it was just very interesting because uh to me, Wolfram is very Kantian, and Donald, whoever the other guy is, was very Leibnizian, and they both kind of leaned into that.
Mm. Okay.
But I don't know. Very interesting conversation. Definitely, it pertains to like what our, I would say, our group is striving for.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree. I'd agree.
Um, but yeah, definitely give it a listen when you can, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Okay.
All right. All right,
All right,
man.
bro. Have a good day.
This was a good talk.
Yeah, definitely a great talk. Thank
All
you
right.
for all the wisdom with gaslighting, though. That really got me thinking.
Well, I mean, I spent so much time thinking about it, man. It was like Julie's talk is good too, but I mean,
Send me that on Instagram,
yeah,
her
yeah,
talk
yeah.
when you
I'll
can.
find it. I'll find it. Yeah, I'll find it. It's like one of the like her old videos before I interviewed her.
Okay.
But yeah.